Hello, everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and I am here with our hosts of HBR Talk. That's Lauren Brooks and Hannah Wallen. Welcome, ladies. I hope you guys are doing well.
Sure am. Let's go.
All right.
How you doing, Hannah?
I'm doing. How are you?
Let's do it to it.
All right.
Sounds good.
On today's show, we're going to be looking at a video that was up. I think it was uploaded pretty recently from Piers Morgan's new, I guess you could say, podcast or something. I mean, essentially, a lot of these people who used to be like big, you know, on like MSNBC or BBC or whatever, they're all like, they've all been canceled. So I think honestly that's kind of what happened. They've been canceled by the mainstream, and now they're essentially doing, you know, smaller podcasts like Bill Maher is a good. And I mean, like, you know what? More power to him. Like, this is the truth of cancellations and being Me Too'd and whatever else, right? It's that you cross some people for whatever reason, and they try and destroy your career, and you try to like pick up the pieces. And you know, these people who get canceled, they don't disappear, they don't die, they don't just go away. So Piers Morgan put out an episode of his podcast, and he interviewed I guess, well, I don't think it's a feminist because she doesn't seem to like the label, but her rhetoric is very much in line with feminists. So I'm just going to say a couple of women, at least one of whom is a feminist. And there's a guy from the Lotus Eaters, which is actually kind of surprising. I don't remember his name, sorry. And they're discussing the Me Too movement. And, well, let's take a look. Yes. So, sorry for the weird colors. I'm just trying to protect. Let me share screen with you guys. So you can see the video and hear the audio. More important.
And
Yeah. So it's hashtag Me Too 5 years on. Has the Me Too movement gone too far? Is it possible?
Gone too far. Like
Are we there yet?
The question itself implies that the Me Too movement itself was not going too far. Just I have to start out with that because I hear that all the time, and that is accepting a narrative. That is, and it's people who have been criticizing the left because he's left, but he's been criticizing the left on some things.
Yeah.
And he missed the boat on this one, and a lot of people missed the boat on this one.
Oh,
hashtag Me Too was not about supporting victims of sexual violence. It was about promoting the idea that when specifically women and girls, and only women and girls, make allegations of sexual misconduct, that we are not allowed to have any doubts, have any skepticism, that we should act against the target should be canceled, the target should be humiliated, the target should be investigated, the target should be punished without any investigation, without any, and when I say investigated, I mean like without any investigation into the validity of the woman's statement. So this guy can have, basically a colonoscopy of his life, right? But not anything about her life. Did she, was she actually in the place that she said it happened? Was there video proving her wrong? Is she consistent enough in her story that it's even believable enough to investigate him, and so on? It's quite bullshit. And when male victims of female perpetrators posted in that same hashtag about their experiences, the women in that hashtag swarmed them, abused them for it, and told them, go make your own hashtag. So they did. And then the women of the Me Too hashtag swarmed and abused the men in that hashtag. Stop trying to distract from our hashtag. right? So it was essentially about believe women. It was not about sexual violence. It was about
Mhm.
queenship, right? It was about
Mm.
being superior. It was about being on that pedestal. So
Yeah.
the Me Too movement was already too far. Before the Me Too movement, when we had the Believe Women standard, that was too far. Before the Believe Women standard, when we had this idea that it was only something that was done to women, that was too far.
Mhm.
And when we had this idea that responsibility for one man's violent behavior could be a men's issue that all men were responsible for, and so on. Like, that was too far. So this is like saying, has Me Too gone too far? It's like going to the bottom of the ocean and finding the parts of the Titanic and saying, did it take on too much water?
Mhm.
Yeah.
A little bit,
Yeah,
maybe.
and it's always, well, that's the thing, like this kind of rhetoric around Me Too, like, has it gone too far or whatever. Yeah, it's basically built on the premise that it it's like some novel new thing, like believing women, when
Yeah.
it's just what we do. We shouldn't, but it's what we do. Um
Yeah,
and it's always
and
been the
like
case.
and like they're really just wiping it in everybody's faces. Like this was their goal, right? To just
Mhm.
remove men from positions of power. And all right, well, 5 years later, have we done enough?
Mhm.
Are there enough white men that have been unseated from their positions of power
Mhm.
that we can now usurp that and just slide right in and take over? Is it enough?
Yeah, well, that's what's being suggested, is that women continue to have absolute authority over whether or not a an act of sexual misconduct has taken place,
Mm,
and whether or not men are to blame for it, and whether or not women are victims of it. And
right.
that's basically the whole thing. And Piers has the normie take. He's like most of these normies. They're like, oh well, there was a time where, and that's all built on the whole, like, feminism was once, like,
Hmm.
important and shit. Like that, it's the
Exactly.
same exact uh logic. So they basically say, well,
Yeah.
women have obviously been oppressed historically, so now
Yeah.
we're trying to correct things, right?
Yeah.
And no, go ahead.
So before we go on with the video, I just want to preface this by reminding everyone that this is the same Piers Morgan that says that any discrimination or any criticism against any woman is misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And
guess.
so, and now I watched a little bit of the video. He
Yeah.
does kind of, he tends to
Look, he
lean a
tries.
little bit on the side. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, he
He doesn't
tries
want.
to. He's trying to do what he thinks is fair, but
Mhm.
he's so, like, you know, uh, gynocentric and bought into all this shit. And
Yeah.
again, that original narrative, and this is the thing that has to be completely destroyed. This original narrative that men have, willingly and joyfully and with all intent, they have oppressed women for most of history, and only because this is the thing that is key to all that, only because women stood up and teamed up and fought back in the 1960s, only because of that are we anywhere near, like, true equality, whatever the fuck that means. But this is the kind of shit that these normie types always say. And because they're operating from that presumption that men historically oppressed women, because of that, then they will always have this concern in their, maybe in their subconscious, in the back of their head, that men will do it again. They will oppress women again. They will bring it back, like, if they have the opportunity. So we have to keep reminding them that women only recently became liberated and free, and it was their fault that they weren't for most of history. And it's a lie. Like I know it's a lie, and it's a frustrating lie, but it affects the mindset of people like Piers. It affects the mindset of normies that believe that. Anyone who buys into the rhetoric that men have historically oppressed women, they will buy into, well, Me Too was once, necessary and good, because it's the same logic. Right?
So one of the things that I learned as a tool against this, and of course I learned it from my dad, and his use of it was in conversations. I don't know if people remember, but just 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of public discussion of the fact that there were tribes in Africa that sold African black people to white people from other countries and to Arabs and so on for slavery. Like, that discussion wasn't happening. At the time, you didn't hear about, this group of people is wearing this pattern that is actually, created by this characteristic of this tribe, or this movie about this fictional hero is about this tribe. That was not a big discussion. It was the fact that people talked about it and pointed it out over and over again and ridiculed the idea that a few men in a ship, a few white men in a ship, just dominated the entire continent of Africa. And that was my dad's take. He was like, yeah, when people start basically black and white, not just racializing, but black and white thinking, dividing that and saying that, well, just these slavers from Europe came over and just dominated the entire continent of Africa. Dad would start bringing up, you're really slamming the entire population of Africa as so inferior and wimpy that 34 men on a ship could dominate them.
Right.
And that kind of, they brought the slaves from tribes that were there. They were the losers of different wars between different tribes. It's still wrong. It was still an atrocity, but it brings into focus the fact that this was not just an issue of guilt by association with a particular race. There was much more complexity and nuance to the situation, and if we want to keep it from ever happening again, we have to pay attention to what those things were and what the irrational, quote, logic was behind it happening in the first place. Like, what led to this? What thought patterns were people engaging in that led to this? And that's what needs to be addressed, rather than saying, well, your skin color makes you guilty of this because other people with the same skin color did it, because every skin color is guilty of that. And we have the same issue in regard to laws in the past were not nice to either men or women. Feminists complain about the fact that a woman, once she got married, a woman's property was no longer considered hers. She was under the responsibility of her husband, and he was responsible for her property. And so he administrated it in her name. And they consider that to be not her property anymore. Just like your child has toys, and you administer those toys and administrate those toys in your child's name. If a toy is too dangerous, you put it up until your child is older, right? And if a toy is broken, it's your job to get it fixed or get rid of it, or talk the child into getting a different toy. And although there's not much of a comparison between toys and, say, a piece of property that has a home on it, like land or financial property, if your child has a bank account, you do the same thing, right? And if you let your child's bank account be decimated because you don't pay attention to what's going on with the banking system, or you don't pay attention to what's going on with your bank, you're responsible for that loss. If people only looked at the child's end of that and say the child has no rights, and they don't look at the fact that if the parent just takes that money for themselves, they can go to jail. if you steal from your child, you look at what happened with Macaulay Culkin and his parents. He had to sue his parents, and he won. They didn't have anything left to give him, but he did win. That situation was what men were in, and it would be similar to if your teenager committed a crime. If your teenager went out and stabbed somebody, if you would go to jail and your teenager wouldn't. Mm-hmm. So women's position was more sheltered than that of a child, and men's position was more vulnerable than that of a parent. But feminists only looked at women's situation, and they looked at the restrictions, and they looked at the lack of respect for autonomy that a woman might exercise, right? That women were treated like children. And they don't think of the fact that in achieving that and treating women like children, our leadership, our social leadership, our legislators, our executives, our kings and queens, whatever,
our vice president,
our vice president, but they basically made men. They put men in a position where they were punishable for things they hadn't done and couldn't necessarily control. And feminists never care about that. They only care about women's situation. So yeah, feminism, it's really easy to turn around and say, with regard to the history of feminism, that it was all men's fault and all women's suffering. But the reality is it's far more nuanced. And then on top of that, like, we hear from feminists all the time that women are just as capable as men. And their objection to women being treated as less capable and more in need of being socially and legally sheltered than children, that, like, they object to that on the basis that women are just as capable as men and should have just as many rights as men, and the expectation to uphold their end of the social responsibility that comes with those rights.
Exactly.
But that necessarily means that if feminism was ever a good thing, if men really were oppressing women throughout history, if patriarchy theory is legitimate, the basis for the entire feminist belief, that means that women are inferior because they couldn't put a stop to it until the 20th century. So throughout history, all prehistory, and then all of history up to the 20th century, one gender dominated the entirely unwilling and helpless other gender.
Yeah.
Until suddenly, during the 60s, men developed compassion for women. Right?
Yeah.
So you got to catch 22 there. Either women are as capable as men, and women are as responsible for coverture as men were, as willing as men were, and as involved as men were, or women really are inferior and coverture was necessary. Which is it?
Well, I think we know the answer.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move on with the video. Well, start the video. Started it yet.
Yeah.
Q Brother Soulstar gives us $5 and says, little off topic, but did you hear about the law professor Mary Ann Franks? She wrote an essay encouraging violence against men. No, but
no, we'll have to find it.
Yeah, I'll just have to go look it up. So, all right, let's take a look at this Piers Morgan thing.
5 years on from what became known as the Me Too movement, there's a growing backlash. Some influential people argue it's become divisive, pitting the sexes against each other with an assumption of male guilt, leaving many young men feeling marginalised. Recently interviewed two people at the forefront of that backlash, albeit with very different styles and rationales. He's psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson.
People have been after me for a long time because I've been speaking to disaffected young men. You know, what a terrible thing to do that is.
And earlier this week, I spoke to Andrew Tate, the so-called toxic male influencer who's now banned from social media. The full explosive interview airs tomorrow night, but here's a little taster of that.
I believe that confident, strong men who stand up and protect and provide for women are a good thing for the world and a good force for the world. And I don't think that I put a magic spell on anybody. I think there's a whole bunch of men in the world who understands my value. And if men grow up to be like me, you're going to have a whole bunch of people with no criminal record, dedicated athletes who protect and provide for the people close to them, are fantastic for the economy. And I'm certainly not the worst influence out here, Piers.
Well, clips of both of
All right, I'm just
So
pausing
it's
there.
interesting because those are pretty good hooks. It makes it sound like the conversation is going to be balanced and fair, and in both of those cases, he tried to steer the conversation in ways that were unbalanced, unfair, and quite manipulative toward the public.
Yeah.
Well, in the actual video clips.
Yeah, in both of those interviews when he did those interviews, yeah.
Well, I think that with Jordan Peterson, and I think it really just says something about Piers. Jordan Peterson starts crying in the interview, and Piers Morgan thinks that he's crying because of whatever the fuck Olivia Wilde said about him. You know, the actress.
Yeah, he didn't understand the situation.
No, he didn't. Like, he was not crying because Olivia Wilde threw shade at him. That's fucking stupid. That's what he was thinking, and I think the reason is because Piers Morgan is kind of a thin-skinned guy that I think will get really upset if he thinks that some Hollywood celebrity, has insulted him. But but Peterson was crying for the men. Like, he was empathizing with the men that were being used as a kind of bludgeon against all men. So essentially he was crying for the incels, or what people call the incels or whatever, because he wants to help them, and he doesn't understand. He's frustrated and saddened by the fact that no one else seems to want that for them as well. That nobody wants, good for these guys. And that's what he's crying about.
Hello, Jordan, have you heard of us? We're right here.
Well, we've been doing this, but and we've had Peterson on, but it was a long time ago,
Yeah.
But no, it's okay. Like, I'm not bothered by that at all. I don't need him
Yeah.
I think he's probably in high demand right now too, so he's probably barely keeping up with requests.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. But either way, doesn't matter. He's doing some good work. We're doing some good work. It's okay. As far as Andrew Tate goes, I think it's still kind of the same. Like, okay, Tate is, he's not really saying anything revolutionary. I think that it's good that, men find some purpose and pursue it, get a mission, and go accomplish that mission. And I think that's his message, right? Like, if more men were doing what I was doing, essentially what he's saying is, and I know it sounds like a boast, but it's probably true. He said, I don't have a criminal record. I haven't, I don't hurt anyone. I'm involved in fitness and sports, and I have goals, and, and all of that. And he basically is saying, if more men were behaving the way I'm behaving, then we'd all be better off. And I think that, again, he's not even making that about women. And that's another thing that it's worth noting. He didn't say anything about women and, making women out to be kind of the goal. Because I think a lot of men, they make women the goal, and I don't think they should.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, those are very fair. Those are very fair presentations, I think.
But and so in watching that interview with Andrew Tate, Piers goes on. He just harps over this idea that, or I guess it was a quote that Andrew said that this woman is a man's property when she gets married, and this. So there was this whole kerfuffle over the idea of property.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it was just way completely blown out of proportion, because again, Piers does not like to listen. He likes to bloviate. Right. And so I think it's really interesting, this idea of property, because when it comes to the woman in the situation, there's no problem with her identity of what she feels should be her property, right?
Yeah.
She's allowed to take over anything that man has. It's now her property. If she feels that she doesn't want to be in the relationship anymore, and that's now her property. The children are her property. But how dare a man think that, listen, okay, if I am the head of the household and I'm supposed to protect everything within it, that I have some level of authority. And I get what he was saying, and I think everybody here gets what he's saying. It's not about controlling a person. It's about saying, listen, this is probably what we should do if we want to protect this thing that we have, this family.
Yeah.
This, and
Well,
it's not wrong, but Piers just keeps harping on this property. It's that word.
Yeah, he
I
doesn't.
think
He doesn't get it. I mean, essentially, the concept that, and this is another thing that a lot of people don't get, the concept that you cannot be responsible for something without having authority over that thing.
Right.
And that's just an absolute truth of reality, because if you make someone responsible for something without giving them any authority, you're essentially saying that they are a slave.
Exactly.
So you gotta, right? And if a woman, and I think this is the thing about Tate too, I think he's talking about a situation where a woman chooses to submit to their man and become essentially a dependent. And he's okay with that because he makes good money or whatever, right? And he's basically like, yeah, we can have this arrangement. But what this means is that it doesn't mean you can just do whatever the fuck you want. It means that, you're essentially under my care, but that also means you're under my authority. And there are plenty of women, this is the truth, that are totally fine with that. That as long as they feel like they're being taken care of, they're okay with not having authority. And
That is true.
Yeah.
And the submissive wife, the submissive wife idea in terms of tradcon rhetoric and lore and whatever, like the basic idea for it is that the man has the authority, the man has the responsibility, and he has the ultimate decision-making capacity, that the woman's there to be his helpmate and his partner, and that she should support his decisions. Unfortunately, even when both sexes profess to be okay with that, even when both sexes are like, well, we're going to do it this way because this is our belief system and everything, the man will uphold his end of that, and quite frequently the woman will not. Instead of supporting his decision making and being there as his partner and playing a soundboard and advisory role and someone who knows that ultimately he's going to make the decision, but she's still responsible for sharing information with him if she has it. They'll undermine the man. They'll not share information with him and then judge him for not knowing it and not basing his decision on it and so on. They'll resent his authority. They'll try to manipulate it. They'll try to top from the bottom. I guess that's the easiest and quickest way to put it. And then they'll blame the man when they cause problems by doing those things. And I've seen that over and over again. And it doesn't mean that traditional relationships can't survive. It means that unless the wife is as accountable for upholding her end of it as the husband is for upholding his, they're not going to be successful.
Yeah, well, that's fair as well, and I think that Tate is, I think that he at least believes that he's able to discern, if women are doing that. But let's continue with the video, because this is really not about Tate or Peterson, but it's we're trying to get into it. So
some of those interviews have exploded online. Literally millions of people have been viewing them. Jordan Peterson, for example, the whole interview has been viewed 5.5 million times on our YouTube channels, rightly or wrongly. There's clearly a huge groundswell of of interest, at the very least, in their views, if not support. So was Me Too an overdue reckoning, or has it become a damaging battle in a raging culture war? Isabel still with me, plus political journalist Ava Santino, a conservative commentator, a young man who agrees with Peterson and Andrew Tate, Connor Thomason. Connor, welcome to the show. Let me start with you.
I'm going to pause it there just to make sure we don't get, whatever. So Connor is the guy from the Lotus Eaters. He's all right. I think that he's still a little blue-pilled on the feminism question, but otherwise he's all right. And these other two ladies, I think that one of them is a conservative commentator, the woman in the colorful shirt, and the one in the black is she seems to be a feminist. She seems to be a feminist. Although I don't think she likes she doesn't seem to like the label. So it makes me a little curious. Maybe she's just avoiding the label because it's got stink all over it.
She's trying to be avant-garde.
Yeah.
I'm the feminist. I just don't call myself a feminist.
There's also gotta remind people that there is also a difference between gynocentrism and feminism, in that there is a difference between flour and cake. And gynocentrism is an ingredient of feminism, but it doesn't always result in feminism, just like flour doesn't always result in cake. You're looking at not that feminism is all that comparable to cake, although it can make your ass fat, and feminism seems to make your ass fat, right? But from sitting on such ridiculous ideas, it's gynocentrism is kind of a root issue in regard to feminism. So you may find a lot of women who will go along with, in fact, most women will go along with some feminist ideas. You don't see a whole lot of women complaining about the Violence Against Women Act, gendering the entire area of law surrounding intimate partner and sexual violence to exclude male victims and excuse female perpetrators. And that was a horrendous act. And yet, most of the argument about it is whether or not it should apply to people on Native American reservations and whether enough money is being spent on it. So gynocentrism is a bigger problem. And women who don't identify as feminist but agree with feminist initiatives like Me Too or the Violence Against Women Act or opposition to equally shared parenting laws and stuff are almost a bigger problem than feminists are, because they don't mean to run cover for feminists, but they do it anyway.
All right, so he's gonna ask Connor first about this.
I found it very interesting interviewing Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, both very controversial characters in different ways, both positioned as a kind of kings of toxic masculinity. I certainly didn't think Jordan Peterson was that. And when it came to Andrew Tate, I couldn't really conclude after 90 minutes of grilling him. I gave him quite a hard time. I couldn't really conclude what he had done that was so bad that he had to be expunged from social media life altogether. But it showed me the sensitivity around all this. And if any man now behaves in a way that looks like it's toxic masculinity, bang, they're expunged. Is in that process masculinity itself getting expunged and demonized?
Well, okay, I'm just pausing it there just for the...
Okay, I have to say something because, that's the very same thing that he did in his interview with Andrew Tate. The people who were watching that show were watching him as he, quote unquote, I was grilling him. No, you were just being a bloviating dick and not letting him get his thoughts out. But he was doing the very same thing that he's now, saying, oh, is this what's happening?
Well, maybe he thinks he's doing the devil's advocate thing, because now this guy, who probably supports men, like I said, I think they're a little blue-pilled on some things, but generally they're on our side, the Lotus Eaters, because that's Carl's thing, But I think that he's afraid, or Piers is afraid that this guy's going to find himself kind of outnumbered because there's two women. and who knows what they're gonna say, you know. So
Yeah, I mean, see, and here's where I am with Piers. Like, I don't think that any opinion that he has is a genuine one. I think he gets paid to say what he says, and so I'm not going to take anything else that he says with a grain of salt, because I know that that's, if it wasn't making his the people that he works for money, then he wouldn't be saying it. Or maybe he might have a different opinion if you could get him off the cuff and, but
Who? Piers Morgan?
Yeah, Piers.
I wouldn't, I don't know. I don't think it's worth the trouble.
It's not.
Because if I had the opportunity to get on Piers' show, I just try to make as many quick points as I can. And then, be done. Like, I'll just make all the points right there, lay it out, because I know he's going to try and talk over and everything. I'm just going to make the points, and then, we can go back, because if he wants to.
Yeah.
Like, his whole thing is, I think he just likes the controversy. He likes to, flirt with it, and then when he gets it, a lot of people watch. This is why his whole intro is him talking about how many views he got for his Jordan Peterson interview. And I'm like, yeah, but can we talk about Me Too? Can we get to the topic?
On this issue, though, like, I with regard to what was just said, I think he kind of gave himself away just by the way he talked about the term toxic masculinity and separating it from masculinity at large. And the reason I say that is because that, again, it's like with the Me Too thing. You're assuming that Me Too wasn't already, beyond a bridge too far, right? And you're assuming that toxic masculinity is a legitimate description of a masculine phenomenon. But when you actually look into the characteristics that are laid out as this is what toxic masculinity consists of, these are outward signs of toxic masculinity, it's human behaviors that children grow out of if they have good parents and good mentors as they grow up that teach them more effective and more socially acceptable ways of handling things like conflict, their own insecurity, their interests in different things like the opposite sex or sex with same partners, things like that. Like you learn somewhere in elementary school that you don't grab the attention of the opposite sex by kicking him in the shins if you're a girl, or by snapping her bra if you're a boy, right? Because the first year that girls start getting those bras, the boys start snapping them, and girls kick boys all the time out at recess if they like them. And it's just one of those things that we can't attribute to a gender if we're being honest. But feminists attribute it to a gender, and they wrote a whole bunch of academic papers about it that weren't really logically consistent or rational. It was almost entirely made up. And it was mostly made up by a guy who was going through a profound experience of gender dysphoria at the time that he was writing it, and may have just, inadvertently communicated his experience of masculinity as a prison into, well, this is what masculinity is like when it's toxic, right? But the reality is these are behaviors that are genderless and that are toxic because they communicate or display immaturity. And until we can get through that and we stop applying it only to men, we'll never cure those kind of behaviors in adults. And at the same time, it's going to be used to demonize men forever, even though in reality, the vast overwhelming majority of what constitutes masculinity, it has been a force for good in the world.
All right. Let's hear some more from the Lotus Eater. Well, his answer.
I would say so. I mean, I'm sure that you'll have this experience with your own relationships, Piers, and that women if you say something controversial, whether it's something on the Peterson side of the spectrum or on the Tate side of the spectrum, a little bit more explosive or a little bit more academic, some women are very much drawn to a man who can be a bit more confrontational, say exactly what he thinks. It's the verbal new version of what gladiators used to do in the arena way back.
Well, certainly, I think Ava and Isabel are laughing because they know that they're drawn to me in that way because of my combative nature. But
Well,
Ava, you're smirking and laughing. I mean,
That's what Jordan Peterson would describe as disagreeableness in women. And yes, there's a certain level of
for
attractiveness.
For sure.
You know, so
well, men are generally more disagreeable. But the other thing is that like what he was also describing is and I like that he describes it like it's, you know, gladiatorial games because it's sort of like competition. But it's not only that. Like it's just like Jordan Peterson said, in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. And that is as complete a statement as any, which means
right.
if I have an idea, but I haven't shared it with anyone because I'm afraid of offending them or whatever, then I may as well not have an idea at all. Because like unless I put it to the test, so by saying, hey, I get my friend and I say, let me tell you something I've been thinking about. And then you tell them, and then you ask them what they think. They might say, oh, you're fucking wrong. This is bullshit. Here's why. And they give you some additional info. Or they might say, wow, that is a really interesting idea. Let me add a little bit, you know, like something from my personal life that might make sense to sort of like further reinforce that idea, or maybe like, you know, critique it a little bit or whatever. But the only way, the only thing that results in is your thinking and his thinking are both better off now. And that idea or that thought has become a little bit more refined. It's come closer to something divine, something perfect. Just a little bit, maybe a lot, right? And that's what conversation and debate and discussion is. And so what he's and it is sort of like a fight, you know, it's like wrestling, right? And I think that I don't know if this guy knows that, but that's how I see it, because these are the things that, as I was saying, Peterson has talked about. In order for us as people to evolve, in order for us to get better at doing things, we need to say things that other people might find upsetting. Because the only way you can really talk about difficult, important concepts is to say things that, you know, other people don't like. And you know what? That doesn't matter. And that's like, it doesn't matter what they think. And I think that's important. And again, you can see that right here, because in general, I think that women tend to be avoidant of that. So this guy says, well, you know, you need people like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson. And I mean, I think that you need a whole range of people in between. You know, I don't need him to say that, but I think it's true, to discuss these issues and be honest about it and work towards something, you know, like together, that's going to be a net benefit for, you know, men, right? And these women, at least one of them was like shaking her head, and because she doesn't think that thought is important. And that's kind of what this, to me, that's what they're rejecting essentially. So,
you know, we even need more than a lot of people will acknowledge. We needed Roosh V. We didn't need him to tell men how to live, but we needed him to tell men things about women that are very politically incorrect to say about women. And he did, and people got very upset about it. And honestly, you know, we also need him to, you know, people like him to say things about relationships that are just dead wrong, that men can say, you know what, I think that's a stupid idea, I'm not going to do it. Or, you know, this doesn't sound healthy, I'm not going to do it. Because that's an exercise in understanding yourself and understanding your interests and your goals. And it also gives them the opportunity then to talk about it with other men and with younger men and say, look, what this guy is saying is dumb, and here's why from my experience, while at the same time acknowledging that there are things that women do that are very self-destructive. There are things that women do that have no value except self-sabotage. And there are people out there that are always going to take advantage of that self-sabotage. And we aren't going to hear that from guys who are just telling other guys, here's how to support yourself. Here's how to improve yourself. Here's how to live your life in a way that will make you happy. It helps them. It helps a lot of young men very much to be able to recognize that, when a woman self-sabotages, she may take you down with her. When a woman self-sabotages, she may not be the check and balance that you need in order to avoid your own self-sabotage. And some men are going to come up with stupid things to say, just like some women do. And just because a man says something doesn't mean you should listen to him, and just take what he says at face value. Sometimes you have to judge each other. And if we all did nothing but basically try to support growth without talking about these other things, we would be ignoring a very important side of the growth and development of men and boys. Feminists have got that down. Like, they talk about dysfunctional behavior in men and boys that women and girls have to watch out for. But it's very politically incorrect to talk about dysfunctional behavior in women and girls that men and boys have to watch out for. It's one of the reasons why those guys get invited to shows like that, and we don't. They probably would have invited Roosh V, because he's sort of like he's the unfiltered, blunt side of that. But
I don't know if he still is, because he's kind of
no, he's not now. Now he's totally changed what he's doing. But at the time, they would have, because they could have made a spectacle of him, where they can't even make a spectacle of us.
All right. I have a super chow from Meredith G. She gives us $10 and says, "Honey for the Badgers. The threat narrative on rape is working on Piers Morgan. He's going to bend the knee hard so that he can." All right. Thank you, Meredith. He might be trying to get in good with people who canceled him. Possible. All right. So let's play some more.
Point here, a lot of young men feel they're getting disenfranchised by society. They're all being over-demonized, that any attempt to be the traditional male figure is now being rubbished and called toxic.
Well, I mean, if you really felt that and you really went out there and you were an alpha male, then you wouldn't be bothered about a bunch of women telling you that you were.
Well, you would if you get cancelled, like Andrew Tate. If you get banned from.
He's hardly been cancelled. He was on your programme, which is on national television.
But it's the only platform actually he's had for a long time, because all the social media companies banned him, literally banned him. He had his email gone, his Google gone, his Facebook gone. It all went down like dominoes.
Well, he's still on there, very, very prolific on there. I can't move for clips of him.
Yeah, but they're not generated by.
No. He's not on there. People are reposting his content. He's not there, you daft cunt.
Yeah, it's like talking about the memory of someone as if it's the same person.
Exactly.
Well, and the other thing is, it's interesting what she's saying there. Because he could get exposure on Piers Morgan, the bad things that have happened to him don't count, right?
Right.
So it's like saying that since I got married, and my husband is kind and loving and gentle and cares about me, and we support each other and have a partnership and all that, it erases the traumas I've experienced in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those are no longer valid or relevant. They didn't happen because now they've been covered up by this marriage. Right? And I don't think any of these women, either the two that are on there or any of the women they associate with, would accept that idea, especially if they knew some of those traumas. But they'll say that about men, right? They'll say that about men's experiences, and they'll say that about people who have been shut down and silenced. Well, if you can speak in one place, then you haven't been canceled.
Right.
Like, try going through that experience. Try being shut down everywhere. before you start telling people that, well, you can go somewhere else and talk, so there's no big deal.
Right. Well, that's not the good part.
By him now.
Well, but that's been for quite some time.
But should he
He's still
be
got
punished that way?
But what is punished? What is punished? It's
Punish
just,
is where
obviously...
companies take a decision which, in my view, in this case, was perverse because they still allow, for example, the Ayatollah of Iran to have a Twitter account.
Yes.
So there's no consistency here at all.
Well, but however, we love a bit of free market. I'm sure you do, judging by that suit, which is lovely. But you know, social media companies are private companies.
Can you not
they can do whatever they they can do.
I'll take
whatever
all the
they like.
objectification I like.
As if this bitch didn't scour the fucking internet for her goddamn outfit. Anyway.
Well,
the private companies argument is dumb for a very, very simple reason, right? Because there is an intricate relationship between corporations and the U.S. government, where corporations are heavily supported by the U.S. government and they're heavily beholden to it. And we've already had news come out recently, like in the last few months, that the federal government was heavily involved in censorship on social media, and that's actually a violation of the First Amendment. It's one thing if Twitter was created as a site for interpersonal communication, and in the creation of their site, they came along and they're like, all right, this is for safe for work communication. So no porn, no nudity, no not safe for work tweets, nothing like that. And we're going to censor that. And people agreed to be on the site and have that type of communication. And yep, that's all good and fine, right? But as a site that it was created to be, it was created to how did they put that? Remove the barriers from it was created for people to be able to communicate widely without barriers or something like that. I have an actual screenshot of their credo that they used to have posted on their site that they removed right about the same time that Google removed "Don't be evil" from their wall. And that pretty much changed Twitter. And they didn't censor based on, hey, we want to be safe for work, or hey, you can't put illegal things on here. In fact, there are things that are illegal that Twitter condones. And if you report them when you find them, if you report them to Twitter instead of, say, law enforcement, Twitter will ban you. But they took requests from the federal government to censor political speech. And that is specifically the thing that the First Amendment was created to prevent.
Yep. It's true, but they're just going to use these silly arguments because they do want censorship. They like it.
All right, Isabel.
But Ava, your point about, if men were that alpha, then they wouldn't be that bothered by this, doesn't really help us when it comes to boys growing up. And that is one of my worries, that for teenage boys now, they are so terrified of the consequences of putting a foot out of line. It's hard enough being a young teenager, working out how things are, working out how to do dating and all of that, without the terror that if you touch in the wrong place at the wrong time, you may find that your whole life is destroyed.
See, I
and
like
there is
that
far
terror.
too much.
Here we go.
Well,
Here we go. So you're a terrorist, you bitch.
Well, okay, so the woman in the colorful shirt is kind of, she is sticking up for at least boys. And I think that all of this is very fair. I mean, of course, like, you're a teenage boy and you're trying to navigate the world and your hormones are going and you don't know what is acceptable and what is not because the rules are either non-existent or they're constantly changing. So what can boys do except avoid women? Which
Exactly.
I think is what a lot of them are doing. So.
And here's this fucking terrorist dressed in black talking about I love that. I like that. I like that fear. I like that terror.
Yeah, she's the kind of woman that would call a guy a groper if the gal he was making out with, with her hands all over him, said, no, not that far, when he went for first base.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, no, I'm gonna rub my hands all over your back and your neck and your arms and your legs and every other muscle I can get my hands on that isn't sexual, right? But no first base.
But
even if she was feeling up his pecs, no
Right.
first base.
right.
You know?
And
And if he does, before asking, even though she did before asking, he's a bad guy, but she's not because, he wanted it.
Lauren?
I was gonna say, like, and let's not forget what she's going to require for his attention, at least up to until that point, right? He's got to take her out. He's got to buy her dinner. He's got a couple of drinks, maybe at least. Oh no, but don't you dare try to step over the line. And if you do, it's your fault for whatever the hell I decide to do to you afterward.
Yeah.
See, women like that wouldn't like me because I just recently described this on Twitter too. A couple of the best dates I ever went on. One, we went hiking at Hocking Hill State Park. The only expense related was getting gas in the car and the food we bought to take with us. And then another one was his church had a Halloween party where we went out on a scavenger hunt for food for the local food bank that the church was involved in, and had points for specific things, and you couldn't just go to the store and buy them and so on. Like what they needed the most had higher points and everything. And we got dressed up and went out to different houses in the neighborhood. Not a penny. It cost a penny except for the gas it took to get to the church and back home from the church. But those are things that women who demand that men wait on them hand and foot and then say, but you don't deserve any reciprocation. And if you do even one thing that I disapprove of, you're toast. Right? They hate stuff like that because the guy isn't subjugating himself. He's not wooing her. He's enjoying a mutual experience with her, and they're learning about each other from it. And that's not fair. Right?
Yeah.
Not if you're above him, not if you're on a pedestal.
Yeah, exactly. I gotta say, I love the screen cap right here because
Yeah.
like the women they're doing the hand gestures and looking at each other, blah, 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 and he's just looking like,
what?
Fuck are you?
New me trying to explain just dropped.
Okay.
I like that.
As a
I
mother
think
of
that
a
men
teenage
should be
boy, I
frightened.
don't like
Really?
that,
That's the
Tara.
most
I do.
malicious thing I've ever heard.
That is
I think that
awful.
men should be frightened
I think
to
you'd
touch
feel
women in a way
differently
that
if you
they're
were,
not
if you
comfortable
were.
with.
But we're talking about
Yeah, but we're not
teenage
talking
years.
about-
So men should be psychic.
She'd feel differently if she had a son.
No,
Oh,
she
you-
wouldn't.
So she's
Well,
basically saying that she
hopefully.
thinks that men should be afraid
Yeah.
Yeah, I know women who have
Cross-
raised sons that don't feel differently.
to
Well,
cross
yeah.
an arbitrary, invisible boundary with women, because it's like a guy meets up with a girl and they're gonna go on a date and they have no prior romantic experience with each other whatsoever, but there's definitely interest, and she basically comes up to him and says, okay, here's the thing, there is an invisible barrier, an invisible line that is constantly moving, is completely arbitrary, and you're not going to be able to predict when you're getting close to it. There are no signs or anything. But if you cross it, then I'm going to essentially like get you expelled from school or kicked out. Or
Arrested.
whatever. Yeah, arrested or whatever. And I don't even know where it is. I don't even know how I'm going to feel about it. But
Until you do it, and then until I get mad at you, like 2 years later.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
So that's what. So why would any man put himself through that? And it's obvious, so it's obvious that it's not worth the trouble, and that's what this is all about. And it's mainly because we've given, I think, far too much authority to women over this. Far too much. So,
well, what we've done is we've given women far too little accountability.
mhm.
Like, it's fair for people to have authority over their own bodies, But what we've done is men are accountable for anything they do with their body, right? And men are accountable for communicating their boundaries, even to the degree that like they're accountable for being explicit about communicating their boundaries. And at the same time, they're responsible from sorry, Missy Lynch, I cannot lean away from my headset. Let me see if I can adjust a little bit. But if this helps a little, men are responsible for how women feel about their communication and their boundaries. So if you say no, I don't want to do this, and it's, you know, I've got my reasons, and the reasons don't even have to be I'm not attracted to you. It can be, look, we don't have any birth control. I don't want to risk a pregnancy. We are trying to accomplish these things before we even decide on the status of the relationship or whatever. Women have the capacity to guilt a man over being them being hurt by that. Well, you rejected me. How dare you? Right? And people will understand the woman engaging in behaviors that a man would not be accepted engaging in if they do it in response to that rejection. Right? So women are not accountable for communicating their boundaries. They're not accountable for what they do with their bodies if they violate a man's boundaries. And they're not even accountable for their attitude about a man's boundaries. That's the big problem. It's not authority, it's lack of accountability.
Yeah, fair enough. I lowered your volume a little bit, so
okay.
We'll see if that works. Okay.
Well, if we both do it, that might actually make me too quiet.
Yeah, I don't think it's too quiet on my end, but if you guys think it is...
That's okay. I had a dyslexic moment. I think I called missile launch Missy Lynch. So both names I know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that you see. I would say that attitude actually is part of the problem too. That's to me toxic femininity. That is saying you should all be terrified, you men, if you put one...
Of assaulting.
Well, I think we all understand what sexual assault is.
Assault?
What Isabel's talking about is that young teenage clumsiness
really
in many
hard.
cases, which is now being recategorized as assault. Is that a problem?
It's not being recategorized as assault. It's always been assault. It's just we're...
Oh, there she goes. There she goes. And so there's two things to hit here. First of all, it's not toxic femininity either. It is toxic behavior that women are more known for. But anybody can engage in that kind of behavior. The thing that she's doing that's toxic is dishonesty in a way that facilitates coercive control, which is a form of abuse. And here we are, you know, she's talking about this as a sexual assault, but when girls do it, she's not going to think of it that way, you know. And the thing is, again, in the moment of a makeout or some other engagement in a date setting where the people involved are actually already, you know, hands-on with each other and stuff. It's not assault to continue to show affection for somebody and to, you know, even, you know, what would be considered groping if you just walked up to a stranger on the street and did it isn't groping when you're in the middle of the beginning parts, like the foreplay to a sex act, and you try to go to the next step. Like, that's bullshit to call that the same thing. And women only do that when the person who is trying to move the action forward into the next step that is the next logical step in their engagement is male. They don't do that when it's a girl trying to push things to the next step. Should we start considering it a sexual assault, for instance, when a woman starts, or maybe breaking and entering, like when she leaves her shampoo in the shower at your apartment, even though you haven't moved in together, and then she starts leaving some of her clothes there because of how often she spends the night. Oh, and then there were things in the refrigerator that you never eat, but she likes. And, you know, pretty soon it's her lipstick is permanently on the bathroom counter in your home. And you know, she has her own parking space like in front of your house. That's where she parks, and so on. Like, where are we going to draw the line here? Are we going to say it's only inappropriate when men do it? Or are we going to say, hey, as people are forming relationships and are progressing in a particular sex act, you know, if you don't verbally lay boundaries, they don't exist. You know, and you got to be able to tell the difference between breaking down someone's door and storming in and putting all your stuff in their house, and leaving the shampoo and the lipstick in the bathroom. You got to be able to tell the difference between going from snuggling up and kissing someone on the neck and caressing their back and their shoulders and everything to fingers on a boob versus approaching a stranger, shoving them up against the wall and groping them. And if women can't do that, and women can't engage in dating habits without setting those boundaries ahead of time and saying, hey, I'm not ready for this, you know, I will kiss you, but I don't want you touching my boobs, and you know, and stuff like that, and don't start engaging in a behavior that leads to that. If they don't want it, then, you know, you can't have dating. You can't have relationships. Like, this is why men are walking away. This is why men going their own way is a thing. Because women can't be honest about how this stuff progresses, and women can't be honest about the mutual engagement that takes place in dating and relationships and sex and so on.
Yep. Well, and this is how feminists and women like this want it. They don't really want men and women to have, you know, relations.
Yeah.
All right, let's play some more.
Being recategorized as assault. It's always been assault. It's just we're finally talking about it.
I don't agree with that.
That's
But,
ridiculous.
Teenage boy fumbling with teenage girl is not
even that.
in most cases assault, is it?
Do you remember Aziz Ansari, right? Half the heels of Me Too, half the heels of Harvey Weinstein rightly being dragged through the courts, and he should have got way worse.
Disagree with him on the Harvey Weinstein thing. We got to let that play out.
Right.
But
we
of
still haven't
course,
seen the end of that.
This is another one of those things where they say, well, this thing is obviously, you know, an argument. But like, it's like they're giving the feminists a bone. Like, I'll throw you a bone with Harvey Weinstein. I'll throw you a bone with Bill Cosby. I'll throw you a bone with, you know, before the 1960s. Stop doing that. Stop. Mm-hmm. If we don't have the evidence of Harvey Weinstein having done anything illegal, okay, or, you know, that warrants punishment, there is no evidence of that yet. If there isn't any, let's stop giving up that ground, because you're only strengthening the feminist argument on the whole, even if you're using Harvey Weinstein as a means by which to sort of like get in and score some quick points. That's all I wanted to say about that. Stop it. Let that case play out. Assume nothing, because if he gets all of his appeals, then the only thing you're going to be faced with is the fact that in most cases, if not all of them, he was sleeping with women because they wanted to sleep with him, because they wanted to become stars. That's the reason. Okay.
I still keep going back to the one where the woman posted as evidence that he sexually harassed her. He asked if he could flirt, and she said, "Sure, go ahead," and then he did.
Yeah,
like that was evidence of harassment.
So we have
here's the thing. There's enough actual cases that have gone through the courts that they could bring up, but they don't. You can't just stop talking about the Weinsteins and the cases that haven't been, you know what I mean, that have
I know
aren't done. You know,
and that's the thing,
it's just so
is
weak to
It is. The thing is that the Harvey Weinstein case is the catalyst for Me Too. So it's the reason why there was a Me Too. And none of the like none of what is available in terms of evidence actually justifies or supports the existence of Me Too. Even if you think he's gross, even if you think the whole thing is disgusting, which I do to some degree, only I guess I do overall, but it's more of a moral thing for me.
It's immoral.
But
yeah,
like I don't like it. It's gross. It's slimy. But the thing is, though, it's not just him. It's the women too. That's my. And if you can't see what the role the women play in that, and you're just looking at the big fat gross Jabba the Hutt guy, then you're reforming the narrative in your mind that those women are somehow innocent, even though, again, the evidence seems to point to the fact that they offered their services, or he asked for services, and in exchange promised them fame and fortune. And they all took it.
There was another director that went through this kind of controversy, and it came out in the course of the controversy that his first sexual experience was with an adult woman when he was like 13 or 11 or some ridiculously young age that was and it was transactional.
Yeah,
and so his programming in terms of how sex works was women use sex in a transactional way. And as soon as the discussion started about that, his case disappeared. Like, I haven't heard a thing about it ever since then. I can't even remember the name of the director off the top of my head in order to discuss it.
I'm gonna say, is it Roman Polanowski?
No, it's not Roman Polanski. It's not him. It was Roman. It's not Roman Polanski. It was another guy who was overweight and he wasn't as famous as a director, if I remember right, as Weinstein.
Was it the Nickelodeon guy?
No, it's before that.
But
it came out during the Weinstein thing.
It's not that important.
It really isn't.
Yeah,
it really isn't.
In any case, what it speaks to is, like, and I've wondered if this was investigated in regard to Weinstein, if the same thing would happen. We have a phenomenon that will not be discussed in regard to cases like the Weinstein case, wherein women use sex in a transactional way for years and years, for their whole lives. No, it wasn't Joss Whedon either, Derek Workman, but there's the fact that people can keep naming guys and like, this sounds like what happened to this guy and this sounds like what happened to that guy, brings it right back to women will do this. They'll use sex in a transactional manner over and over and over again, but as soon as men do it, it's rape. Women will do it all their whole lives. The ring you get when you become engaged is using sex in a transactional manner. You used to be expected to be a virgin to get that ring. You used to be expected to reserve yourself and your loyalty from before you meet your husband to the day that death do you part, for him and only him. And that ring was a symbol of his dedication to the woman who would be loyal to him sexually, and loyal to him romantically and intellectually and everything. And I gotta finish this. And we have created a situation now where women can do that and then turn around after the transaction has taken place and they've gotten what they wanted from it. I will have sex with you for this thing I want. I will get the promotion. I will get the movie part. I will get the music contract, whatever it is. I will get dinner in a movie, and then turn around and say afterwards that you forced it on her. And it's a lie. It is a community-wide, population-wide, worldwide false allegation. And we need to restore due process in regard to it.
Yeah, and at least stop taking the initial narratives at face value, because I think that the reason why the Weinstein thing has taken on a life of its own is because in the beginning, and this is what I've noticed very frequently, in the beginning when the allegations first came out, there were people, even conservative commentators, that were very, very sus of like these allegations. That they were basically saying, well, look, here's the nature of Hollywood, right? And it seems to me that these are women who, you know, like if they were really experiencing what they claim, why didn't they go to the police? Why? And then you have to consider the fact that there's this guy and he can make anyone famous and he can make them rich and he could like ensure that they win Oscars because Oscars are all phony anyway. And whatever. And he would do that. And all he asks in exchange is for them to touch his pee-pee. And so they all knew this in the very beginning, but somehow shortly after that, everybody got amnesia and they all started thinking that, you know, well, this guy's actually gross. And look, I don't know why this happens, but if I'm being really charitable, I might be able to guess that I don't like this guy. Therefore, I think that he's capable of immoral things. And so I'm just going to associate those two things. But that's not right. Like, that guy deserves due process and everything, just like we've already said. But it's like it just gets memory hold. Like, they just forget. And I think there's like a bias. And part of it is, well, most of it is, it's a man. But, you know, and so you're just going to be like, well, look at all the allegations. Probably some of these are true. It's like, no, you can't say that because you don't know. It might be none. Why wouldn't it be? All these women work in the same industry. All these women know each other. Why wouldn't they all just get together and say, we're all going to accuse this guy of this thing? And then they just do it. I mean, it makes sense. So, anyway.
While they sit back and fan themselves with their $100 bills.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so he's talking about Aziz Ansari. If you guys don't remember Aziz Ansari, he's like this little Indian guy, and he went on a date, and I think like he, you know, did something awkward. I don't know, and he got in trouble.
She kind of went down on him, but then she kind of changed her mind, and then she changed her mind about the whole situation. Yeah, but he anyway. Good. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was. She did something. She changed her mind about it, and then she accused him of impropriety for her choices and her actions.
Yep.
Right. And that's what he's bringing up, which is it's a pretty decent example.
Had a consensual relationship with a woman, she felt a bit awkward, and afterwards rescinded consent, and he was lumped in and he had his career.
No, I'm with you on that one.
Cancelled.
I'm with you.
So then why should men be afraid of that?
Because he didn't touch her without consent, did he?
No, but she rescinded his consent, and
how are
she
young
saw
boys
that
supposed to navigate this, the whole thing? I'm thinking of my teenage son. You know, he's 14, 15. What's he supposed to say? Would you mind if I put
Isabel,
my
you are an
hand-
extremely strong woman. I know in your house you're teaching them the difference between assault and then coming on to someone. I know you are.
She just heard an example where a guy didn't commit assault and he was punished for it anyway, and is now telling the mother of a kid who has, you know, is questioning what is her son supposed to do if you can get accused of assault even if you didn't commit it. And her answer is, well, I know you're teaching him the difference, but his knowledge of the difference is not the problem, right? His knowledge of the difference doesn't matter in a situation where the girl chooses to ignore the difference, and then the state that she goes to chooses to ignore the difference, and then the public that listens to the girl and the state also choose to ignore the difference, including any prospective employer, anybody he might have a relationship with in the future, anybody that he might move in next door to who might be violent toward him, and so on. Like, to her, it doesn't matter if a boy is at risk or a man is at risk for having their entire reputation, the entire trajectory of their life, because a man's life depends solidly forever on his reputation, and women don't understand that. You know, women can have their reputation completely wrecked, and their life is not over, right? They can just change their lifestyle around a little bit, and they can even play victim of having their reputation ruined, turn it all around on the destroyer, and become, you know, a celebrity of oh, poor me, I was destroyed, right?
Yeah.
Like, they can destroy their own reputation and come out on top. They can get a business making purses that nobody likes, and their friends will all buy them. Like, just ask Monica Lewinsky, right?
And pee in jars.
But this is why, like, that is why I said if it was her teenage boy in this situation, she wouldn't care, because she doesn't understand the difference between how men live and the social environment that men live in, and the legal environment that men live in, versus how women live and the social and legal environment that women live in. She doesn't understand the advantages that she has, and she doesn't understand the disadvantages that a man has. And even if her boy went through all of that, she would blame him. She would assume that he must have done something to cause that, because it wouldn't happen if she was lied about.
True. We are getting close to the end. The video is about halfway done, so that's good. We can do the other half later. But let's watch another clip and make this the last one.
About is it's been very interesting watching the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, how it's all developed, because a lot of very bad people, Harvey Weinstein and others, got their due comeuppance. We can all agree with that.
Yeah.
This is not even something to be debated. We're really talking about the grey line, right? Where is that grey line?
Yeah.
How do you know?
So what he means by the gray line is basically, you know, you're on a date with a girl, and she clearly wants you to get a little closer, but she doesn't want to tell you that she wants you to get a little closer, and she doesn't want to tell you how, but she's waiting for you to take initiative, because if you don't, then she's going to, you know, feel rejected or maybe not find you attractive, because this is another thing, is that, you know, women believe that men who are assertive are more attractive, and so they provide opportunities for men to be assertive, but then men are afraid to be assertive because they're afraid that it's going to come across as predatory or rapey or something. And so, like, nothing happens, basically.
Yeah. The sad truth is there needs to be a generation of girls without a prom, without you know, any kind of special romantic night. There needs to be a generation of girls who don't get asked to the movies, who don't get wooed, who don't get treated as if they're anything special. That a generation of girls that never hear a guy apologize for using crude language in front of them, that never get a door opened for them out of politeness, that are never the reason that the men in the room, like, shape up and stop belching and farting at each other. Like, I know you guys don't do that all the time, but there needs to be a generation of gals that you know, when they get to adulthood, they don't find a partner. They don't find anybody willing to form a solid relationship with them. That can't find even a sperm donor if they want to be a mother without a father in the picture. That can't even, you know, get treated specially at work. Can't get treated specially in any way, shape, or form before women will understand. There needs to be a generation of girls that get treated like boys by the men, and get treated like they're invisible. You know, and once that happens, they will suddenly realize we had it easy, and we gave that up to be bitchy. There needs to be a generation that just is completely erased, but nobody will do it. It won't happen. It needs to, but it won't.
It'll be the Jessica Valenti's, but she's not really the target audience. But I mean, because she's already done for. But you're absolutely right. Like, there needs to be a generation of women who just realize that, hey, I can't get the same kind of attention that I used to anymore. And it'll happen for them in time, but God, not before they learn some real hard life lessons that
Yeah.
men are just forced to deal with, you know.
Mhm. All right, let's play one more clip.
Navigate it. When you're an experienced adult and you've been around the block in many ways, you can navigate that much more intelligently and with emotional intelligence than you can if you're a teenage boy. And I think the point Isabel makes is a good one. I've had 3 sons in their 20s. I've always taught them to be respectful to women, and I believe they are. But I do think it's really hard for a 16, 17-year-old boy now in this environment to know even how to start
they are all
having kind of some
terrified.
kind of physical
Something
relationship
that-
with a woman.
Those
Well,
good boys
something
are
that needs flagged in
terrified.
that before she answers. He pointed out that he taught his teenage boys to be respectful to women.
Right.
Mhm.
But
Of course he
nobody
did.
has said anything about, do they teach their teenage girls to be respectful to men?
Exactly.
Well, of course they're not going to do that.
And what's also completely glossed over is the fact that a lot of the people that we're talking about here have been raised by single mothers. Have they even been taught how to fucking, identify what's going on, or is it?
Well, I mean, of course, this is, again, I said this is a very blue pill show with blue pill people on it, and they're just not going to include or consider men in the conversation. So they're just going to say, like, Piers Morgan wants us all to know that he really cares about respecting women. So he tells us that he raises his boys to respect women, which I don't understand. I hate it when people say that, because it suggests that if they don't intervene and teach their boys to respect women, then their boys are just going to go around like raping and beating up women randomly because they just don't give a shit about women, apparently. And it's not like something that's hardwired into us as men to basically like want to protect and prioritize the safety and comfort of women. That is the norm, and you're not teaching your sons anything special. Like, you're not sitting them down in front of a chalkboard with like one of those pointers and you're like, this is a woman and this is how we have to treat them. That's not happening. Stop bullshitting. Basically, your kids are just modeling their behavior towards women on your behavior towards your wife. And that's basically it. And the other men who are involved with adult women in their lives. And that's essentially the end of it, because that is generally what men do. So there's no need there's no need to explain to us how woke you are on the women respecting question, is what I'm saying.
Well,
Trad cons do that too, though. I mean, they do a thing of teaching young men that women have special sensibilities that need to be coddled. And there's a degree to which you could say, women have special sensibilities that they're going to respond differently if those aren't coddled than a man would to the same situation. And that's true. Men also have special sensibilities, different sensibilities that women don't understand, that they're going to respond to certain things differently than a woman would. But when we talk about that in terms of, say, visual sexual stimulation or behavioral communications of sexual interest, and how men and women respond differently to those, all of a sudden you get accused of excusing assault, when in reality what's going on in that discussion is you have to understand you can't expect men to see boundaries that you don't lay down, right? And you can't expect men to, you especially can't expect men to see boundaries that after you didn't lay them down, you stepped way the hell over it into their territory. And most TradCon families back in the day, like when I was a kid, you taught, as a parent, you taught boys to be respectful of the normally expected boundaries that a girl would have. That unless she comes out and demonstrates to you that that boundary isn't the same for her as other girls, you know that boundary exists preemptively. But girls were also taught that boys were only expected to have that understanding as long as you didn't step way the fuck over that boundary in front of them and erase it. And now we're told that women and girls can erase that boundary, and men and boys should still assume it's there. And that's bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Let's do a little bit more.
I know that from talking to my son. He's just like, I'm just not going there. Is that healthy?
Yes, I think it is, actually. I think it's better to not have a physical relationship than to have one that could ruin a woman's life.
But then how do they ever start?
It's life. If somebody touches your boob, your life isn't ruined, lady. I'm sorry, but your boobs are not that big of a deal. Like half the population has them with working mammary glands, and a lot of people that smoke certain substances have them without working mammary glands. Yours are just a drop in the bucket, and the idea that ruins her life, when in reality, her lie that she wasn't a participant in that is going to ruin his life. That's a serious thing, because he doesn't have to commit a violent crime. He doesn't have to hold her down and beat her up and take from her. All he has to do is move an inch down too far with his fingers, and his life is ruined. So I don't want to hear her fucking complaints.
No.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what we're gonna get into, the spicier part of this next week, because I gotta go pick up the wife. So I don't know. Like I thought it's an interesting conversation.
Quite.
Yeah, it's a bunch
Very.
of blue pill people kind of like arguing over blue pill shit, but that's okay. We can be here to clarify, and help them out. Hopefully they'll see this at some point. I don't know, and they'll stop with those habits. I guess I don't know what else to call it. All right. So,
just for the record, I did find that article, Men, Women, and Optimal Violence.
I saw that.
And I downloaded it, and I linked to it in our special chat for the show and everything. So once we're done with this, if we want to, we can, it's like 44 pages long. I don't know if an article or if it's that's an entire publication and the article is in it. So if it's 44 pages long, we might pick parts to discuss.
We might have to do some quote mining.
Yeah.
All right. So stay tuned for that. I guess we're just gonna wrap it up here. If you guys like this video, please smash the like button. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. And most importantly, please share this video, because sharing is caring. We will finish it off hopefully next Thursday. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR Talk, and we will talk to you all in the next video. Oh, let me just make sure that I didn't miss any super chats before I hang up. Zaranx gives us $2 and says, did you cover the Morgan Stanley Sheconomy article? Not yet, but
ooh, I'm gonna look that up too, because that looks interesting.
I think I have that, in my links. And let me just take a look at Rumble. We don't get a lot of action here. Sad, but nothing. All right. So anyway, as I was saying, thank you guys so much for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you all in the next one. I think I'm doing something with Allison tomorrow, which is like shocking. So talk to you all then.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.